These are the headlines we're following at this hour. South Korea imposes more sanctions against North Korea linked to weapons development, following the regime's recent failed launch of a space rocket. This just a day after the U.S. slapped fresh sanctions in response to that launch. President Yoon Suk-yeol will be heading to Indonesia and India next week to attend the ASEAN and G20 Summits, seeking to expand South Korea's role in regional security and the global economy. South Korea posted a trade surplus for the third consecutive month as a decline in exports slows down on strong auto shipments, while import prices also decreased on falling oil prices. Good afternoon. South Korea has imposed more unilateral sanctions on North Korean individuals and institutions linked to the regime's weapons development. This follows Pyongyang's recent failed attempt at launching a spy satellite, which prompted the U.S. to slap fresh sanctions on the previous day. Choi Min-jung has the details.
South Korea has slapped a new round of sanctions on North Korea in response to the regime's attempted launch of a spy satellite last month. The Foreign Ministry announced Friday that the sanctions target 5 individuals and 1 institution involved in the regime's nuclear and missile development and funding. This is the 11th round of sanctions put in place against the North during the Yoon administration. So far, a total of 54 individuals and 51 institutions have been put on the blacklist. Newly added to the list this time around is a North Korean company involved in Pyongyang's development of armed equipment and the export of IT personnel, as well as 5 company officials. The government says that by putting sanctions in place ahead of other countries, it demonstrates its strong will to lead the international community's efforts to block North Korea's development of satellites, drones, and nuclear weapons. The ministry stressed the sanctions come with support from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, as established during the recent trilateral summit, to further strengthen cooperation against North Korea. In coordination with South Korea and Japan, the United States on Thursday sanctioned 2 individuals and 1 entity involved in generating revenue for Pyongyang's development of weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles. The action targets 2 individuals, a North Korean and a Russian, who have directly supported or helped generate revenue for North Korean organizations that are linked to the development of WMDs, and a company owned by one of the individuals. The U.S. Treasury Department said the action is being taken in response to the North's second failed satellite launch as well. Both Seoul and Washington said they will continue to coordinate closely with each other and Japan, as well as the international community, to ensure that North Korea stops its unlawful and destructive activities. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. wrapped up their annual summertime joint military drills to bolster their combined readiness against North Korean threats. The last day featured live-fire drills, including intercepting missiles, striking targets, and destroying defense structures. Lee Dae-hyun reports.
The air forces of South Korea and the U.S. on Thursday held a live-fire exercise together over the West Sea. This was part of the Ulji Freedom Shield exercise, which involved air-to-air missiles and air-to-surface missiles. Around 30 fighter jets and attack aircraft were deployed where the joint forces practiced striking a simulated target. South Korea's fighter jets, including F-35As and F-15Ks, launched an air-to-air missiles to intercept and strike a drone target which performed as a low-altitude cruise missile. Air-to-surface missiles, including GBU-56, were then launched to destroy the opponent's defense structure. The GBU-56, which features a semi-active radar homing system, is capable of targeting mobile weaponry such as a transporter erector launcher.
We have reaffirmed the excellent performance of the Korean-made FA-50 jet and the guided bomb and improved our strike capability. We pledge to use this skill to immediately punish enemies in any possible provocations.
Captain John Flanagan, who took part in the drills, also said that Seoul-Washington integration is still evident and paramount today, even after American pilots defended South Korea's freedom 70 years ago. Meanwhile, the chairman of Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kim Seung-kyun, met General Anthony Cotton, the commander of U.S. Strategic Command, who's currently visiting South Korea. The meeting took place at the B-1 bunker in southern Seoul, making Cotton, who visited the country for the first time since taking office in December last year, the first U.S. strategic commander to visit the wartime bunker. They shared their assessment of the security situation in the region, including North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. They agreed to bolster cooperation between Seoul's JCS and the U.S. Strategic Command and also decided to closely cooperate with South Korea's envisioned, quote, Strategic Command, which will be established next year. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will be heading to Indonesia and India next week, ramping up multilateral diplomacy by attending the ASEAN and G20 Summits. President Yoon plans to expand South Korea's role in regional security, climate change, and digital transition. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will strengthen Seoul's engagement in the Indo-Pacific at key multilateral summits next week in Indonesia and India, with North Korea's nuclear threat, climate change, and regional cooperation high on the agenda. The top office announced Thursday that the South Korean leader will attend a series of meetings of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Group of 20 in the Indonesian and Indian capitals, which will focus on regional security, economic and social issues. Arriving in Jakarta on Tuesday, Yoon will first meet with Korean expats before holding a summit with the 10-nation ASEAN bloc on Wednesday morning. The leaders of Japan and China will join for a +3 meeting, with South Korea representing the Northeast Asian trio. The security-focused East Asia Summit on Thursday will address North Korea's threat to the region, along with South Korea's role in upholding a rules-based international order. Yoon will then hold one-on-one summits, then a bilateral with the Indonesian president upon their 50th year of diplomatic ties.
Through the summit with Indonesia, a leading country in ASEAN and a key partner in implementing our Indo-Pacific strategy and the Korean-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, we plan to discuss ways to strengthen strategic cooperation in diplomacy and security and deepen partnerships in future industries such as electric vehicles and batteries.
Resuming its multilateral diplomacy in New Delhi, Yoon will highlight Seoul's response plan to climate change and its growing role to bring peace and prosperity in the world as a global pivotal state. The leader will speak during the sessions of the G20, proposing greater support for countries vulnerable to climate change and stronger global cooperation for the transition to clean energy. Yoon will also emphasize the need to establish new global norms in a rapidly changing world, having presented a digital vision back in June for ethical standards on digital technologies. With ASEAN countries and India making up some 21% of South Korea's export markets, the top office says President Yoon will roll out economic diplomacy, encouraging active business and exchanges between future generations, particularly in the digital sector.
We will strengthen cooperation in advanced industrial supply chains with Indonesia and the Philippines, whose electric vehicle and battery supply chains are closely connected with ours, while also discussing supply chain cooperation measures under the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, along with 7 ASEAN countries in India.
Amid questions over a possible bilateral with Beijing or a trilateral including Tokyo, a senior official indicated that such meetings are unlikely to happen next week. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's Defense Minister Lee Jong-sup held bilateral talks with his Polish counterpart, Mariusz Błaszczak, on expanding defense cooperation. The two met on Thursday during Lee's 4-day visit to Poland. Seoul's defense ministry said the chiefs discussed ways to deepen their partnership in defense and ramp up arms cooperation. Lee also examined preparations as South Korean companies will be taking part in the International Defense Industry Exhibition, also known as MSPO, set to kick off next week in the Polish city of Kielce. The Polish minister also revealed that Poland will soon conduct a military drill using recently purchased South Korean armaments, including K2 tanks and K9 howitzers. He added that steps are being taken to allow Korean-made equipment to be produced in Poland. The last regular session of the 21st National Assembly kicks off this afternoon. The 100-day session will run until December 9th and will involve the annual parliamentary inspection as well as the questioning of the government. Lawmakers will also review next year's budget. The ruling People Power Party will focus its efforts on reforms in pensions, labor, and education, while the main opposition Democratic Party will work to establish special safety response measures following the discharge of Fukushima wastewater. There's much at stake for the rival parties as this is the last regular assembly session before the general election next April. South Korea posted a trade surplus for the third consecutive month as decline in exports slows down on strong auto shipments, while import prices also decreased on falling oil prices. Our An Sung-jin explains.
South Korea's trade balance saw surplus for the third consecutive month in August. Preliminary data released by the Ministry of Trade on Friday showed that the country's trade balance last month was $870 million, with imports at just over $51 billion and exports at $51.9 billion. Imports fell by more than 22% on year as oil, gas, and energy imports dropped by more than 40%. The country's exports saw a decrease of 8.4% to $51.9 billion compared to the previous year due to a high base effect from high exports last August. A drop in the export prices for semiconductor and petroleum products also attributed to the drop. However, the decreasing export rate narrowed to a single-digit figure compared to the 16.4% on-year drop seen in July as auto exports increased for 14 straight months. By category, shipments of automotive parts, mechanical products, displays, and household electronic products all rose, while exports of semiconductors and petroleum and steel products all dropped on year. Compared to the previous months, however, semiconductor exports rose by 15%, reaching $8.6 billion, showing signs of gradual recovery. Outbound shipments to the United States and Europe jumped to a record high for any previous August as exports for automobiles and mechanical products sharply increased. Although exports to China and the ASEAN region declined following a drop in semiconductor prices, exports to Vietnam were back in the black with increased exports for displays. Trade Minister Lee Chang-yang stated that maintaining a surplus for the third straight month despite increased global interest rates, a sluggish semiconductor sector, and a slowdown in the Chinese economy was a commendable job. The government added that it plans to establish policies to vitalize trade by diversifying export products and regions. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Exports of South Korean instant noodles hit a record high for the first 7 months of the year. According to Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation and the Korea Customs Service on Friday, the value of ramyeon or instant noodles exports from January through July reached $522 million. This is nearly 18% higher than the previous record from the same period last year. It's also the first time that instant noodle exports have surpassed the $500 billion milestone during that period. Officials largely attributed the rise to the continued popularity and interest in Korean culture and products. South Korea will be participating in Europe's largest consumer electronics expo, the IFA, as the third largest participant, with tech giants like Samsung and LG Electronics among the companies taking part. The 99th edition of the annual event, which kicks off in Berlin on Friday, will be the biggest ever with over 2,000 businesses from 48 nations taking part. South Korea will be represented by a record 174 companies. China will have a much larger presence this year with around 1,000 firms, 5 times more than 2022. The IFA trade show runs for 5 days until next Tuesday under themes including sustainability, AI, and connectivity. Foreign workers have long been essential to certain sectors of the Korean economy, like farming. And with the country's labor shortage growing, other industries are also looking for workers from overseas. Our Lee Soo-jin takes a closer look.
As South Korea's population continues to age and birth rates drop, its working age population is expected to decline at an increasingly faster rate. South Korea's working age population, which made up 71% of the total population in 2022, is projected to drop to 46.1% by 2070. This stands in sharp contrast to the global working age population projection, which will still be around the 60% range. In farms like this, where the labor is physically arduous, one local farm owner says foreign workers are already essential.
It's not a stretch to say that currently without foreign workers, there won't be any farming.
Oriol Emmanuel is a worker from the Philippines who came into the country as a seasonal worker just 11 days ago. Seasonal workers are foreigners who are legally hired for a short period to work during the busy farming season. Today, he, his fellow workers, and the farm owner are planting cabbages. Oriol left his home country for the first time to find a job in Korea.
Best part? All. It's a good opportunity. It's because of my family.
Housing is provided, and the farm owner is proud of the amenities that he has made available.
외국인들이 이렇게 오면 덥고 그러니까 여기 지금 보다시피 에어컨도 설치가 돼 있고 주거 실정이 다 해결할 수 있는 그런 곳으로 다 만들어서 편하게 지낼 수 있게끔 만들어 놨어요.
He hopes that foreign workers will continue to apply with the local government to work here.
But it's not just jobs that are physically strenuous that need more workers. Areas that require a high level of education and training, such as the IT industry, are also suffering from a labor crunch.
The software industry was calculated to have a shortage of more than 6,000 people as of the end of 2021, the most out of the nation's 12 main industries. Smaller IT companies are struggling even more from the shortage of personnel, as it's difficult to compete with big companies that offer lucrative paychecks.
For SMEs like ourselves, it's hard to operate with just Korean developers.
Sumaya Ilkin, who has a doctorate in computer engineering, is an IT researcher who moved from Turkey to Korea last year to work at this company.
We have a strong relationship with Korea, kind of blood brother. So I'm curious about Korea because especially the metaverse and AI field in the Korea also is a kind of a rising star.
Sumaya says she's not only satisfied with the work that she's doing in this company, but she's also grateful for how everyone has been helping her.
I might have some misunderstanding about the jobs, tasks related to it, and these people passionately explaining us even with more details.
Her manager says that she has surprised them with how quickly she adjusted and that she's now a crucial member of the company.
Her ability to learn Korean as soon as she came here was astounding. We also learned a lot from her.
There are still other IT companies looking to recruit experts from overseas. And job fairs like this aim to connect these companies to foreign job seekers.
In Korea, at the moment, it is lack of, human resources, is lack of engineers.
There are IT experts from all over the world who are more than capable and ready to work.
Now I'm pursuing my master's in computer science and engineering. I work with image processing. I'm looking for my job.
College, it was in computer, science and computer things, so that's how I felt like a little bit comfortable to come here and look for a job.
The addition of foreign workers could not only ease the labor shortage, but also help companies in other ways, such as expanding into global markets. 이수진, Arirang News.
You might have heard of the phrase once in a blue moon, often used to describe truly rare situations. Last night, the world witnessed an even rare phenomenon, a super blue moon, making its appearance for the first time in years. Our cultural correspondent Song Yu-jin has the story.
Brighter than a regular full moon, the super blue moon rose for the first time in 5 years on Thursday, shortly after sunset. What exactly is a super blue moon?
Supermoon is a full moon at the closest distance from the Earth, so it is larger and brighter than a standard full moon. Blue moon is the second full moon on the one calendar month.
According to NASA, a supermoon is about 14% larger and 30% brighter than a micromoon, a full moon at the farthest point in its orbit around the Earth. And it's worth noting that a blue moon is not actually blue. As Dr. Cho said, it signifies a second full moon within a single calendar month. A full moon generally occurs once a month, but because a moon cycle is 29.5 days, a full moon falls twice within the same month every 2 to 3 years. Around 25% of all full moons are supermoons, and only 3% are blue moons. So a super blue moon, which has both of these uncommon traits, is more exceptional.
So it's almost 9 on a weekday morning, but as you can see, hundreds of people have gathered here at the Gwacheon National Science Museum south of Seoul to see the rise of the super blue moon. Now that's because if you lose this chance, you'll have to wait almost 14 years.
All you had to do was look up into the sky. Adding to the view was the appearance of the planet Saturn to the upper right of the moon. That's because Saturn was in its closest position to the Earth a few days ago. These celestial displays illuminated not just the sky, but also sparked excitement among visitors.
And it was really cool because no one knew where the moon was until it started coming up over the mountain. And then seeing it through the telescope was amazing. You could see all the craters, and the cloud was covering the moon. It was really cool.
I wished for my family's well-being while looking at the moon. I hope my kids are always healthy.
I hope I no longer fight with my sister.
The next super blue moon is set to come in January 2037. 송유진, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The capital area is seeing bright skies to start out the new month, and it's going to remain sunny all day today. But certain parts of the country are enduring another wet and gray day, and especially those in coastal regions in Gyeongsang-do Province and Jeju Island need to stay on high alert against heavy showers. Jeju Island could see up to 200 millimeters of downpours into tomorrow, and coastal regions in Jeollanam-do Province will see rain picking up with more than 100 millimeters expected, along with thunderstorms and gusty winds. Temperature-wise, most of us are having much more comfortable overnight temperatures, but highs today will be a couple of degrees higher this afternoon, going up to the 30s, but rain-affected regions like Busan are having much breezier afternoon highs. Now, the south coast and inland areas will be drenched with heavy showers this weekend due to the indirect effect of a typhoon, so please keep away from the water. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We saw Korean instant noodles hitting record exports in the first and second quarter, and that milestone comes 60 years after the birth of ramyeon. The history began with samyang back in 1963, a cheap filler food during the post-Korean War period when the country was a lot poorer than now. Samyang's founder thought of the idea when he saw people lining up for porridge using leftover food from a U.S. military base. It was inspired by Japanese instant noodles, but it became red and spicy after then-President Park Chung-hee suggested red pepper powder to fit Koreans' tastes. The market rapidly grew in the 80s, with other makers like Nongshim jumping in, and by the 2000s, all kinds of flavors were being pumped out. Well, 60 years on, Korean instant noodles are still the go-to food for quick and easy meal, but now across the world. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.